Jamal Bryant is very much concerned about DEI. However, this particular issue that actually should be on the forefront of a Christian pastor's mind, it's not on his. And it's because he's too busy crying about DEI and fake book bans. Okay. He's too busy out here begging white folks to love him and attempting to shake down and extort money from secular institutions, all the while lying to his congregation and telling them that this administration is coming for their Social Security check and their Medicare and their identities. You name it, he's out here lying about it. So today, we're going to pull the mask off the madness. And I want to show you why Christians, especially pastors, should be the ones raising holy fire about this. But instead, we've got pulpits that are preoccupied with pronouns and reproductive rights and progressivism, which are things that I do not believe the Lord wants us to be concerned about. So let's go ahead. Let's do a little case breakdown. This is what's happening. Mahmoud versus Taylor. That is the name of the case. And it is a group of parents in Maryland who is suing the school district because they were stripped of their right to opt out of the elementary age children out of reading the LGBTQ themed storybooks. Now, these are not just some, Heather has two mommy type books that, we may have seen here and there in the 1990s. We're talking about very graphic and suggestive and agenda-packed materials that have been handed to 6 and 7-year-old children without any warning and without parental consent. I told y'all, Democrats believe that they share custody of your children with them. These are not y'all's kids. Those are y'all's kids, right? They look at it as a collective. And so what did the district do when parents pushed back, which rightfully so they should have? The district, they pulled a little bait and switch, right? They moved the books out of the sex education curriculum where the opt-outs are legally protected, and they dropped them right into the required language arts program. So they shuffled the deck so that legally parents couldn't say no. They're like, oh, okay, fine. You don't want little Billy to read these books. Okay, not a problem. You can opt out of the sexual education component, and little Billy won't read those books because he won't be involved in the sexual education component. However, we're just going to sneak the books into the language arts curriculum. So while little Johnny, who in Maryland, statistics prove that he probably won't be able to read at 6 or 7, he might be able to tell you how to do something strange with defiled flesh, but he won't be able to tell you what a diphthong is or his letter sounds or his letter blends. He won't be able to do that, but he'll know things that are not age appropriate for him. And so when I heard about this story, I was like, you know what? This reminds me of what happened with Obamacare. If you guys remember when Obamacare was being negotiated and introduced, so many Americans had made it clear. They're like, listen, we don't want our taxpayer dollars used to fund abortions or sex surgeries, right? So what did the Democrats do? Obviously, they had the majority or super majority at that, to wiggle their way around the Hyde Amendment, which would have prohibited them from using federal tax dollars to pay for such things. What the Democrats did was they found a backdoor way in to fund the things that violate the conscience of many Americans. That's what they do. A lot of y'all probably didn't know that. So under Obamacare, the Hyde Amendment was undermined by allowing states to use healthcare exchanges to fund abortions despite claims that federal funds wouldn't be used. So it still was happening, but it forced coverage for all of these controversial procedures like the sex change operations and the medications to go for them and the required coverage for the HIV prevention drugs. You have Protestants and Catholics alike, Muslims who are like, whoa, 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 we religiously object to such things, but it doesn't matter. The government overreach still happened, and I don't know what it is, but I do know we've been here before. And so here we are with this Supreme Court situation, which brings me to my next point. Where are the pastors? Right? While all of this is going down, I just have a question. Where are the pastors and where is the outrage? Now, I have seen pastors, I've seen articles where they are raising their fists over at the Smithsonian, Otis Moss Jr., and all these other pastors that are so concerned about Black history being swiped away from American history. They have all the outrage about that. However, when it comes to this religious liberty situation, and this is not even a religious liberty situation. This is like these freak nasty do nothing diddycrats are trying to sexually pervert your children starting at 6 and 7 years old, and you ain't got nothing to say about it. So here's what I will do. We don't know where most of them are. However, let me tell you where at least one of them is. Like I said, if you have not watched my video from earlier today, Pastor Jamal Bryant, he was busy talking about DEI rollbacks and gaslighting the Black community into believing that we're in this civil rights battle over banned books. And there was a town hall meeting over at New Birth last night. And I thought about it. I said, you know what, I should have went. But I didn't. I can't remember what I was doing. I was resting, but they probably wouldn't have let me in anyway. They would have recognized me on sight. So that wouldn't have been good. But nobody is trying to ban To Kill a Mockingbird, right? What we're trying to do is to protect children from being indoctrinated with material that's just nasty and perverse and pornographic and spiritually poisonous. But let Jamal Bryant tell it. He doesn't give you that little detail. He won't mention that part. So let me be plain. Jamal Bryant's more interested, him and many other pastors like him, they're interested in pushing woke narratives than warning the flock. I was watching Chris K-Dub over at All Things Theology. Shout out to him. What an amazing content creator. We're both cutting our teeth on the YouTube growth trajectory together. And he did a video, I don't know how long ago it was, where Howard John Wesley preached a whole sermon on DEI from, what was it, 1st or 2nd Samuel? Y'all, it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And so it's weird because instead of addressing the fact that school systems are actively undermining the moral authority of parents, you've got pastors like Howard John Wesley and Jamal Bryant acting like the NAACP of narratives, right? They're like fighting these ghosts that are not real dangers, but all the while these other dangers are creeping in through the classroom, and we have an entire boycott of Target over them rolling back their DEI initiatives, which is a complete joke to me, because we've already seen like the original version of DEI by way of affirmative action, and we already have 20, 30 years of that to prove overwhelmingly that it didn't really help Black people in any measurable way. In fact, what I believe the affirmative action did was cripple us more. It's like you ride this bike when you first get your bike growing up and you get the training wheels on. Affirmative action was like that first little DMX bike with the streamers on the side. Did I say DMX? I didn't mean that. I meant BMX. Y'all remember the BMX bikes? Okay, maybe that was a New York thing. I don't know. But anyway, had the little streamers on it, and it was like a little fancy pants bike. It was like a big kid bike, but it had training wheels. Yeah, affirmative action is like that bike with the training wheels, except for the fact the training wheels never come off. So like, I'm short, right? I've always been short. And so when I got my first bike, I'll never forget, my brothers had to raise the seat and adjust the bike and lower the handlebars for me. And truth be told, my seat was low and the handlebars were low for a very long time. But by the time I learned how to ride the bike, in order to ride the bike, they had to take the training wheels off. And I grew incrementally, but I did grow. But affirmative action is like you have a bike with the training wheels and the kid is growing and the kid's getting heavier and their legs are getting longer, but the training wheels are still on. And so they never learn how to just take the little push, when your father or your mama would just push you on the bike and be like, go on and go now. Now you may fall and skin your knee a little bit, but eventually you're going to learn how to ride that bike. And then you become self-efficient, then you become proficient at it, and then you start doing papa wheelies and just wilding out on the bike. Affirmative action is Black folks on a big kid bike with training wheels. So now, where you have other Americans, equal image bearers, might I add, who are saying, hey, y'all don't need these training wheels no more. Like, this should not be a thing. You can do this on your own. You got the folks on the bike who will argue you down and sell you on the fact that, no, I need these training wheels. You take these training wheels off of me, I don't know what I'm going to do, right? And then they want to appeal to a system that they claim is racist and oppressive toward them. But they want that same system to equalize things and give them access on the basis of their ethnicity or gender, because without it, they just don't believe they can compete. It's really weird. I'm to the point now, anyone who is saying they need DEI, just believe them. Just be like, yes, listen, you and your mediocre self with your low expectations, please, we know you need help. Move out the way for the rest of us, though, who want to compete on the basis of knowing and believing and then functioning like we're equal. We don't have a whole lot of time to whine and complain and beg institutions for access when we're like, we're the best to ever do whatever it is that you want done. We will compete on the basis of our own achievements. We don't want your training wheels. Lastly, the thing I'll say about that, Democrats, I told y'all, they've always been masters looking for slaves. And many, not all, many Black Americans are still slaves looking for masters. They just don't have the chains anymore. And it's kind of like having that parent who is still carrying around the kid on their hip and won't let them walk. Right. Like the child hasn't been allowed to walk. So the muscles are atrophied. The calf muscles are weak. Their arches are all messed up because they've been carried everywhere. They don't know how to walk. Well, I want to walk. And those of you who, want to demand to be carried, that's fine. But you look weak and inept and you're to be pitied. But anyway, here's the interesting thing about this Supreme Court case, right? These are the things that even the wicked are worried about. This is where it gets really wild, you guys. Do y'all remember Randi Weingarten? She is the president of the largest teachers union here in America. She is a woman who's married to another woman. She has admitted publicly that, some of these books, okay, they might be a little inappropriate for young children. I thought that was wild to hear her say that. Like, we need to marinate on that. We have someone who is living a lifestyle, sexually immoral with a woman, telling us that, okay, maybe these books are a little bit much. So let me go ahead. I want to play this clip for you so that you guys can see what I'm talking about. Listen to this, you guys.
So joining me now, glad to have with us today, Randi Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers. Randi, nice to have you with us. Thank you very much for joining me. I know that you don't want to address this case specifically because you don't have teachers who are involved in it. But just in a broader sense, in terms of this issue of these books and their impact across the board, you have really talked about protecting books of all kinds in Florida and other places across the board. So do you think twice when you listen to some of these examples of what's being read to 4 to 6 year olds?
So, Martha, first off, thank you for having me on. And I hope that we get to all the other issues in terms of education. But I would say that this is a hard case because parents, of course, have rights in terms of educating their kids, and schools have to be communities. And the moment you have a case like this with such great distrust for what is being taught in a classroom or read in a classroom, I consider that a failure from the beginning. And I say this as someone who is a gay person who understands that we have to actually make sure that families are respected and families are safe and kids are safe, and that differences are acknowledged and differences are embraced. But, once you get a case like this, where, parents are uncomfortable about what is being read to their kids in a classroom, this is something that has to be dealt with in a local level, not in the Supreme Court. And
no, see, we tried that though. We tried that, Randi, and that's the problem. See, you guys don't get excited because you kind of hear a little bit Randi kind of implying that parents' rights should be respected. She don't really believe that. She's on Fox, and she knows darn well she couldn't get on Fox and be like, listen, we tried to get these freak nasty books in and we got caught. And in the Montgomery County part of Maryland, parents pushed back. And that's what has brought us to the Supreme Court, because parents were like, I'm going to fight you all the way up to the Supreme Court level. She's giving and then she's taking away. She's saying, we shouldn't have gotten to this point. And then, parents should be respected, and people's wishes should be respected. She's talking out of both sides of her mouth. And she is saying that, we shouldn't be having this discussion because this issue should never have made its way to the Supreme Court level. That's what she's saying. But what she doesn't realize is this wouldn't have happened if the Maryland school district had just respected the rights of the parents flat out and didn't try to be real sly and sneaky with it. And instead of taking the books out of the sex ed curriculum, they slid it into the language arts program. So my thing is, there is this concerted effort. There is this agenda to say, we don't give a darn about you as the parents. These are our kids. We are evil. We are wicked. And we want to indoctrinate your children with this freak nasty agenda. And we don't care what you think about it. This is how we got here, Randi. That's the part you're not saying. I'm going to let her finish some more.
Parents have rights, and they should have rights in terms of what is being taught in classrooms. And, and we're going to have to actually deal with how we ensure that kids have a safe and welcoming environment, and that we see differences and we accept differences, whether those differences are religious or whether those differences are sexual, and that we actually make sure that the community is there as a community. So
no, we don't, no. See, this is the Weasley language, and this is why it's important, you guys. We got to wear down the wicked with our words. I am not obligated to respect your sexual perversion. I don't have to respect that. It doesn't have a place in school, period. I don't want my kid coming home asking or telling me, Mom, it's okay for, someone to have two mommies or two daddies. Because I'm be like, say what now? Where'd you learn that? Right? Randi is basically saying, we need to have like this ecumenical where all religions are respected, all pronouns are respected, all, sexual things. Why are we even having sexual conversations in school? Listen, I remember growing up in elementary school. I know I had a kid or two in my class whose mama was a lesbian. We kind of knew it, but it wasn't something we discussed. We definitely didn't go to school asking our teacher about it, right? It was just like, okay, Jose's mom keeps coming to school. She comes to PTA meetings. She goes on field trips, and she always has this boyish looking woman with her. We're not asking any questions. They weren't trying to push that on us. It was kind of like, don't ask, don't tell. These are kids. You don't need to be involving kids in these kinds of conversations. And I definitely don't want a teacher taking the liberty to explain to my child, well, there are a variety of configurations of families, Becky, and, it's up to us. We look, but we don't judge, right? We observe, but we don't cast judgment. No, I don't want that. I don't want that at all. Now, this is why I homeschooled my kids, because I saw this on the horizon back in 2008 when Isaiah was born. I was like, yeah, it's going to be a no for me. I was like, I don't know how we going to do it. Lord, I am trusting you, but I can't send my child to that school. And y'all, that was me speaking when I was still a liberal. Like, I was still a Democrat, voted for Obama twice. And I was like, yeah, still can't put them in that government school. I ain't going to be able to do it. The Lord was drawing me to himself, and I didn't even know it back then. I'm going to let her finish some more, and then we're going to move on.
I believe, though, that there's an appropriate age to have a discussion. These are 4 to 6-year-olds, and they're being read. And this is out loud in the classroom, not just, oh, this is a book on the shelf in the library. If there's a particular child that, you might want to read this with. But, just as an example, my pronouns are like the weather. They change depending on how I feel. And that's OK because they're my words. Sometimes I use all the pronouns I can think of, just as one example here.
Let me put it this way. Go ahead, Martha, and I think that this will be shocking to you. These would not be the books I would be reading as a classroom teacher to kids who are 4 to 6 years old. Yeah. And I say this, I went through the New York City public school system. I was a teacher during when we had the big issue around Heather Has Two Mommies. And I think when you don't actually make sure that things are age appropriate and we don't actually have sufficient conversations with teachers and parents in terms of how we accept differences, then you have situations like this right now.
No. There's never an age appropriate time to talk about Heather's two mommies. You're overstepping your boundaries. School is not the place for that. I send my children to be academically trained, for them to be vigorously exercised in the rudiments of math and reading literature, right? Like some classical literature. I want them to learn history and some science. You lucky I let you teach them social studies, okay? Outside of that, we don't need to be having these there is no age appropriate. So she's basically giving license and saying, well, 6 or 7 is a little young. 6 or 7 a little young. But maybe, 10 and 12, who's to say? Like, who sets the standard? This is the slippery slope that we're on, because in one breath she'll say, well, 6 to 7 is a little too young, but 12 and 13 may not be. I have 13-year-olds, and there are certain conversations that I have not even let all the details known about it with my own kids, because I know what they can mentally handle. I got a 13-year-old still play with dolls. Okay. She not there yet. Okay. We'll have those conversations incrementally on my own time, but I'm not about to send my kid to school and then have to do a fight every day because she coming home with books in the language arts program. Like, to teach children how to do a haiku, we don't need sex involved in that. To teach a child from a language arts perspective how to diagram a sentence in English language does not require Heather Has Two Mommies. Okay? Her vocabulary list, her spelling test, synonyms, antonyms, none of that. Analogies, you don't need that type of subject matter in the school. So the point, I wanted to show you guys this because in one breath, like, I wanted to celebrate, okay, and say, you know what, we got a left-wing nut job. She's a union boss saying, okay, yes, this might be too much for 5-year-olds. It's a good sign. At least she can acknowledge that. But that's when the enemy is overplayed their hand. But even still, this is a binary thing. It is a self-evident truth. This is never okay. But yet, school districts like the Montgomery County School District in Maryland, they are still doubling down. This case has made its way all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is like, yes, we actually, we need to hear this. They're not backing off. All the school system is doing was trying to find a new way to sneak in the content and strip you, the parents, of your God-given authority to raise your child in the fear and admonition of the Lord. This is why I was saying, like, where's the church? Where are the pastors who are outraged talking about this? See, but you can't you know what? I didn't even put this in my notes. But when you think about it, pastors like Jamal Bryant and Otis Moss and Howard John Wesley, they can't say anything about this because they're all in bed with the Democrat Party. And if they were to raise a concern about this issue, then that means they also have to acknowledge that the whole rainbow cult agenda is problematic and it's anti-Christian. And they can't do that. So they have to remain silent. There's no way that they can acknowledge that this is problematic, because if they were to do that, their Democrat overlords are going to be like, see, you're going against the memo. We sent you your talking points. You've deviated from the script. Do we need to have a conversation? What's going on here? And not just that, if you start having pastors like that going up against the teachers union, that's going to cause another problem, because they're the same pastors that are upset and that are anti-school choice. These are the pastors that want you to send your children to Caesar's system. These are the pastors that are encouraging you to keep your children in failing schools. They're not the ones advocating for school choice. Now, Jamal Bryant does send his children to private school. They hold little long lives. They've never been involved and educated with you common people. No, they've been private educated. But it's okay for you to keep your kid in a failing school that wants to teach them this this freak nasty, perverted stuff, and it's okay. Let me just give you guys the biblical admonition. Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. When I read the exhortation and the wisdom of Solomon from Proverbs, it's not saying, you know, send them to Caesar and they're just going to come back acting like Christ. Right? Now that statement wasn't an effort to shame those of us who's had to send our kids to Caesar. Hey, I was educated in Caesar's system. Right? But here's the thing. Children are not missionaries. Most are unregenerate. At best, they have a semblance of the knowledge of God because they're getting it at home and they're getting it at church, but they don't have the mental maturity or capacity to stand against this stuff. They don't have an apologetic defense for this. That's why you have to have parents who can advocate for them, who are not labeled domestic terrorists just because they be like, heck no, pump the brakes. Don't teach my child this mess. And the part about it is, Muslim parents were the ones making a big stink about this. That was the rebuke that I've been waiting. I was building up to it, but it's been Muslim parents that have been overwhelmingly loud about this. And I know personally, John Amanchukwu has made this one of his life's missions to be vocal about this. But he's got pastoral support. But I'm talking on a particular side of the theological streets. Where are those pastors? Where are those pastors? Silent. But when it comes to having our children being indoctrinated with this foolishness, parents are called to disciple. We're called to disciple our kids. That is our responsibility, not the state, not the school, and certainly not some DEI trained activist teacher that's pushing identity confusion as enlightenment, as acceptance, or as, you know how it's tolerance. They got all these little new buzzwords, phrases for it. And then our kids are coming home confused and we're trying to figure out, well, how did this happen? The enemy knows that if he can get the kids, he can shape the whole culture. This is why they start in the K through 12 system. This is why by the time they get to university, they half crazy. They don't know if they a boy or a girl. They using pronouns like him, shim, it, zim, zer. I mean, they've been starting them young. We almost are now at the completion of an entire generation that was indoctrinated with this mess. And so that's why the enemy is starting very early, and it started out subtly, but now they're trying to do it legally. And my question has been, where are the pastors? Where's Jamal on this? He can't say a word about this, and he never will. But yet he wants us out here joining the other 200,000 of the spiritually blind people with this dumb Target boycott, when I'm like, if the church was going to stand up about something, a righteous indignation, it would have been this. This is going to the Supreme Court. Like, we're living in a time when the church should be storming heaven in prayer and then storming the schools to pull our kids out and then advocating for school choice. But to do both of those things, you can't be a Democrat and do that. Because to be a Democrat, you have to be on the side of the teachers union, and you can't be for school choice. You can't. You have to give a head nod and bow the knee to the rainbow cult agenda. You can't even affirm that changing pronouns and boys and girls sports is wrong. You can't say that, right? But instead of the people of God storming these schools, pulling our kids out, having pastors be like, listen, I can't tell you how to raise your children, but I can tell you what the scriptures teach. And this is what they're teaching your kids in the schools. Now make a decision. There are some faithful shepherds that are doing it, but they're in the minority. But instead, the ones that we see visibly are the hirelings, those soft, weak jellyback shepherds that are selling out to the social trends and then making their congregations believe that the books that are being banned are the ones that actually shouldn't be banned. Like, when you actually ask them, when you press them on their talking points, you're like, what books are they banning? Let's talk about those books. I can tell you the books that we've been advocating to have banned, but what books are you that you know of that they're banning? He can't tell you. But here's what should be happening. Every pulpit should be ringing the alarm. Even if, I'm not saying necessarily doing it from the pulpit, but having a conversation amongst your congregation like, listen, this is what's happening. And if you're not sober-minded and discerning, your kid can get caught in a snare. I would also say Christian schools, they should be reevaluating their partnerships. And parents, we need to be vet your child's curriculum. Like your kid's life depends on it, because it actually does. Like, just be like, what'd you learn in school today? Let me see these books. Because, see, that's what happened during COVID. COVID gave parents an opportunity to actually see what their kids were learning. And they were like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. That's when all of this really started coming out, when parents became infuriated and Muslim parents took to these school boards and started raising Cain. My argument, lovingly, is that we don't get to check out just because the culture gets uncomfortable. No, ma'am, we can't do that. If salt loses its saltiness, it's good for nothing, but it's supposed to be trampled underfoot, according to Jesus. So I wanted to share that story with you guys to just remind you, we got to start paying attention. Show up to school board meetings if you can. Support legal organizations that are fighting for parental rights, because it's not like, these pastors are not who care about the community. Like, isn't it funny? They claim to care about the community so much, but the stuff that they are loud and proud about is all the wrong stuff. So it's like you can't even hold the pastor accountable. Why? Because he's pushing politics from the pulpit and he wants you to side with the demonic Democrats, and it's evil. And then they want to disavow and say that the project 2025 is among us. And I'm like, shoot, if it wasn't for Project 2025, I mean, we kind of actually, truth be told, a lot of the things on there, I am confused why Christians have a problem with it. A lot of so-called Christians and churchians have a problem with it because their pastor told them to, but they never really looked into it, sat with Bible in hand, and said, wait a minute, why is this bad? I'm reconciling this against my biblical worldview. And Pastor, I'm having a hard time. Why you've been preaching about this all summer, all winter, now all spring, and trying to tell me that this is bad? So my point is, this is not just politics, y'all. This is a spiritual battle that we are in. And if we fight, by standing on the truth, we should be okay. But we cannot conform to the culture. So that is all I kind of wanted to tell you guys about that one.